Hello and welcome to the ChooseFI radio podcast. Today on the show, Jeff shares his loan payoff victory. Ryan calls in to get our input on roboadviors. Who do we use and why? Anthony has a question about capital gains harvesting, and Bonnie shares what she considers to be a great side hustle for stay-at-home moms. Welcome to the ultimate crowdsourced personal finance show. This is your Friday Roundup.
You're listening to ChooseFI Radio. The blueprint for financial independence lives here. If you're looking to unlock the secrets to financial independence and early retirement, you're in the right place. Stay tuned and join a community of like-minded people who are getting off the hamster wheel and taking control of their lives in the pursuit of financial independence. ChooseFI, your home for financial independence online.
Well, we have a lot of topics to dive into, and obviously we're going to talk about this past week's episode with our wives, Danny and Laura. And it came together very nicely. It was one that was requested by our community, and it was one that we kind of did stall on actually doing for a significant period of time. But I'm really excited with how it came out, and I'm excited to talk about it now on the Friday Roundup. And to help me with this, I have my co-host Brad here with me today. How you doing, buddy?
Yeah, Jonathan, I'm doing well. It was a really fun episode having Danny and Laura on the podcast, and I know they had a fun time. We had an interesting time recording it for sure, and it'll be neat to kind of dive into it.
And I love that outtake that you had at the end there, man, because it was, it came off as funny and nice, but like recording that episode was borderline dangerous for the health of my marriage.
Yeah, hopefully everybody heard the outtake there at the end. We don't usually do things like that, but yeah, I had to literally hip check Laura out of the way at one point to get to the microphone. It was I think a little dangerous for both of our marriages, honestly. It's funny how you and I just have our recording process, and when we're in the same room and we're recording, we're typing notes to each other and pointing and making sure we cover things, et cetera, kind of while we're talking. And we're pretty good at that. And I actually wound up typing a note to Laura in the middle of our recording session, and she just like freaked out on me. It did not go over well.
It was the same thing on my side. So I was communicating something to Danny. I don't even know exactly what it was, but yeah, definitely they were adapting to our process and not necessarily realizing that this is just what we do. This is a part of it. But there was a little bit, I'll be honest, I got a little bit of healthy respect for my wife when we finished, because she said, you make it look very easy and very natural when we listen to it. But it was hard for me to come into this and be able to do what you guys do. So, I think it's one of those things, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger type deals.
Yeah, agreed. And I know Laura really enjoyed it. She was very nervous going into the recording, but she had a blast, and it really wound up being a fun time. So I'm sure we'll talk about that more later in the podcast. But yeah, what's been going on by you?
Well, the biggest thing is that I used my Southwest Companion Pass for the first time to go visit my relatives in Chattanooga, Tennessee. We took my infant son to go visit his great-grandmother for the first time. She was thrilled. And from a travel rewards perspective and an optimization perspective, I felt pretty good about it because we were actually able to get 3 for the price of 1, right? A child under the age of 2 flies for free. I traveled using my Southwest Companion Pass and was able to bring my wife along as well. So all 3 of us. And then even cooler, so how with Southwest, the way it's set up is that you can check in 24 hours before. And if you're gaming it out, you want to check in as soon as it opens, right at 24 hours before, because that gives you your boarding position. Well, I did that, and I missed it by a couple minutes, but we were checked in. But I got there and I found out that when you're bringing a child, I think under the age of 6, we were actually able to be included in family boarding. So it didn't matter when we checked in. We just basically boarded at the time for family boarding, which was just incredible. And I got to say, I have flown Southwest, I think 2 other times now, not with a companion pass, but I just love their service. They are the friendliest airline I have ever encountered. From beginning to end, the experience is just incredible. So it was a lot of fun. I have one extra win to tie to this in that we got a rental card when we get to Chattanooga, and I was able to use my Capital One Venture card with that $500 travel credit to wipe off all of the cost for my rental car. So we had this thing gamed out from beginning to end at the airport.
Wow, that is really cool. So I love the 3-for-1 flight using the companion pass. That's fantastic. Was it pretty easy? I think a lot of people have questions on how easy it is to actually book a flight using the companion pass. Could you just quickly talk through like how that worked?
It would have been very easy. Because it was a lap carry, so I had a 14-month-old. That always complicates everything. So I just called Southwest, and again, even on that end, they had a booking agent they had someone there that could help me book it, and it was super, super simple. So I will probably not be doing the lap carry, so I'll have to report back on what the process would have been if I did it online. But you can certainly call them if you're doing it for your first time, and they will walk you through it or do it for you. They were extraordinarily helpful.
Nice. That's very cool. And yeah, just talking about the Capital One Venture quickly, that is a really convenient card for a lot of people because it allows you to wipe out any quote unquote travel expense. So anything that codes as travel on the credit card is an expense that you can use your miles to redeem, as they call it, like the purchase eraser, I think is their term. But yeah, it allows for a lot of flexibility in instances where you otherwise couldn't use traditional miles. So a rental car is a perfect example. A cruise is another example. I know I've talked about getting Walt Disney World tickets through the website undercovertours.com because that codes as travel, whereas buying them through Disney World does not count as travel. So it's a very wide variety of travel expenses, anything you'd book at an airline or hotel's website. So that's the reason why we definitely recommend the Capital One Venture card in the top 2 or 3 of all the cards in the travel rewards universe.
Yeah, and I have one additional tip. I mean, if there's families that are planning on doing some traveling with the companion pass, or frankly, at this point, just traveling in general with an infant, I have become increasingly aware that you need to bring a copy of that child's birth certificate. A photocopy is fine, but you need to bring it with you, even if it's domestic travel. I had encountered that when we went international, but the last thing you want is to get to your airport, your quote unquote hour early, whatever that looks like for you, and then find out that you're not going to be able to book your child in without that copy of the birth certificate. So just a public service announcement from your friendly podcasters at ChooseFI. If you have a small child, make sure you bring that copy of that birth certificate with you. So Brad, going back to this episode that we did with Danny and Laura, obviously this is our story, right? So it's something that we've been talking about, but I'm curious, as you heard Danny and Laura express their idea and their perspectives, was there anything that really stood out to you?
Absolutely. I loved the moment towards the end where Danny was talking about how this just lit you up. And, she kept describing you as her husband. And it was just like so indescribably cute, where she just was so thrilled that you found something that you were passionate about. And that was a special moment for me. I could talk endlessly about the things that Laura mentioned, but the things that jumped out to me were from you guys. And it's how you've benefited from that 72-hour rule that Liz mentioned. I think that was something tiny, obviously, but Danny described you as, quote, Jonathan is an all-in type of guy, right? And I think you guys are growing as a couple, as she said, and you have these little ways, and it's that couch time where you have no tech, no conversations about money or ChooseFI, and you realize, again, with this 72-hour rule that making impulse buys, that's not what benefits you in the long term. So like just taking a little piece of information like that you've gotten from the FI community and actually implementing it into your lives. Like I thought that was really, really cool. And obviously I could talk endlessly about this and I'm sure we will more, but I want to hear like your big takeaways as well.
It was so interesting to hear Danny basically say that she could tell that I was depressed when I went to work. It's true, but I didn't realize it was so visible. I didn't realize that in a very real way, going to my W-2 9 to 5 was killing me slowly. And I remember looking at some of my colleagues that were in their 60s and 70s, and were still doing this and thinking, how did you make it in this profession for 40 or 50 years? I mean, to some of them just kind of looked like shells of a person. And I remember even when I was just going to keep my head down and just follow the plan, I was thinking to myself, how am I going to do this for 40 years? Like if that was the only option, I just couldn't imagine a world in which I was going to have a 40-year career in this profession. Now, I could imagine doing ChooseFI for 40 years. It's not that I am against work, generally speaking, but I was being drained slowly, and all my energy was getting drawn into something that did not light me up. I was looking for an out. I really was. And so it's incredible that we were able to land on something that does absolutely feed into my, my passionate nature, something that I can get excited about, something that stimulates me. I love that, she saw that and appreciated that, and that it factored into her comfort level with me putting us into somewhat of a financially precarious situation. I mean, objectively, like I described my backup and what my plan would be. Like if ChooseFI didn't pan out, I had this financial runway. I could go back into the profession. But from her perspective, she got married to someone with 6 figures of student loan debt, like a madman. I've been paying it all off. And we've been basically getting rid of every little excess purchase that we can think of in order to achieve this goal as quickly as possible. And then we redirect that quickly to savings. And then right as we're starting to get to a place where we're going to be moving forward with our financial plan, everything changes. I say, I'm going to leave this stable, steady 6-figure income, and we're going to go pursue a passion project, which I hope can really become something. But there was a lot of faith on her part that, we could actually pull this off. So it was interesting to hear her kind of live that out on the podcast and kind of get her take on it. And it was kind of cathartic for both of us, I'm sure. And the part of the episode that really stood out to me was kind of hearing you and Laura talk a little bit about child raising, and what that meant in terms of purchasing items for them as they need it, because that's something that we'll be dealing with in the near future. And one thing that really stood out to me is that your children don't have significant say in what it is that's being purchased for them. And what I mean by that specifically is that they don't get exposed to massive amounts of marketing, as in running free in Target and picking out whatever they want and bringing it back to you to make a judgment on that. You go to the store and you make this purchase for them, and they love it. They're very content with it. And that's interesting because it, to me, signifies the full impact of what marketing does to us. When you have unlimited options, then everything has to be looked up for reviews. And then you want to get the best of the best of the best, or whatever is advertised the best or marketed to you the best over time. That becomes the obvious choice. It isn't always the best choice. And you've been able to shelter your children from that for at least this period of time. And in this period of time that you've bought for them, you've been able to instill this financial priorities, this financial ground game. And you can see that in Anna and Molly as they're pursuing a 50 to 85% savings rate. Now that they have this, they will then be able to branch out of this lane. And when they're making purchases for themselves, hopefully they're making it based on value as opposed to just rampant marketing.
Yeah, no, I hear you, Jonathan. And yeah, I think this is one of the most important things that we have going in our lives just generally. And it's this kind of, like I'd mentioned, simplicity parenting, but it's really more simplicity living. That's kind of how we pursue our lives. And we try to cut down on choices. We are like the prototypical satisficers. If you've ever read the book, The Paradox of Choice, like we are not the maximizers. What that means is we are very content with things that check all the boxes for us, but it doesn't have to be the perfect cell phone. Like I actually just bought a new cell phone because my old one broke, and I didn't spend 20 hours researching to find the best of the best and what would be the absolute way to maximize this. I looked around at Republic Wireless. I found the 2 things that mattered to me, and I found really the only one thing that mattered to me was battery life. And I found one that had a 2-day battery life. It was a great phone, checked all the bare bones requirements that I needed, and it had this one thing, and that was a buy. I did that in under 20 minutes. So like to me, that is the way that I like to approach life. And we've tried to pass this on to our children and just not saddle them with all these choices and really making them consumers. Like they don't ever go shopping and ask, oh, buy. Like, I want that. We hear, and this is not to put down other families by any means, but you always hear kids asking for things. And I know families who have these laundry lists for Christmas or holiday time where they want these 50 things. My kids have never outwardly expressed a want for anything, to my recollection. And that doesn't make them superhuman by any means. I'm not like extolling the virtues of my kids. It's just like we have not set that up as part of our lives. Them wanting something is just simply not normal in our household. It's just not how it works. Mom goes out and buys things for them and buys them what they need. And then obviously there are some wants. They love reading, clearly. Like we've talked about that a lot, but we don't go to Barnes & Noble and buy 10 books. We go to the library and take out 10 books. That is a very positive aspect that we've really built into our lives, just money-wise, and just obviously reading is fundamental, right? Like it is the most important thing we have going. So we love for them to go to the library. That's a great thing. But again, it's like you said, kind of shelter. I think that's the word you use. They don't need to be involved in this. They just live these wonderful, happy, simple lives. And I think the four of us really do. And it's why we don't purchase all these gadgets. It's why we don't purchase random things to make the house look nicer. So like when our friends come over, they can ooh and ah. We don't care about decorative throw pillows or things like that. We will probably have the items that we have in our house will be substantially similar 10 years from now. We would never think to buy new things because we have the fundamentals. And I think that's really, really the important part that I want to get across here.
Yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned the name of that book. I haven't read it before, The Paradox of Choice, and I'm definitely going to check it out. But I think that is actually something that we should dive into a little bit more because I think that is a blind spot. So I actually am that individual that is constantly looking at reviews, constantly looking at features. Features is something that is, I think this is a weak spot for many people. And I'm going to go ahead and take a few minutes and go on a soapbox rant on one feature in particular that is used nonstop, and that is Bluetooth. Bluetooth is this random arbitrary feature that seems to be slapped onto any device that has been made over the last 5 years to have you consider upgrading. When I was looking at Instapots to purchase over Christmas, because I'm a huge fan of the Instapot, I was looking at the different models, and the highest end model had Bluetooth. Why do you need Bluetooth on an Instapot? And this goes back to that paradox of choice, in that I love what you did with your phone. You're like, what do I actually need? What phone will do this? Don't go and find out every feature on every single phone ever, which then constantly will push you up to the higher end as you pick up something that you had never even considered before. What do I actually need? And it's hilarious. When I look at my phone now, I need a battery that lasts. That is a huge criteria for me. And that is basically it. Battery and Wi-Fi. I had a buddy who told me recently, I think we want to go ahead and purchase a new truck for our family. And somewhere along the lines of this conversation, I said to him, well, had you considered maybe purchasing a 5-year-old truck where it's already taken that depreciation hit, but it still basically gives you everything that you would want? And he's like, yeah, but I really want Bluetooth. Are you serious, man? You're going to spend $50,000 on a brand new truck because you want Bluetooth? I mean, I have a 1998 Ford Expedition. You could buy a $30 adapter and have Bluetooth in that if you really, really wanted it. That to me is not a unique selling proposition. I could see if the Bitcoin fever had continued into this year, that blockchain would have been the newest feature that would have been offered. You could have had blockchain encryption from your Instapot to your phone via Bluetooth. I mean, the features just abound, but at some point it just becomes the paradox of choice and you get sucked up into the mixed messaging world of marketing.
Yeah, I totally hear you, man. That's crazy that this friend of yours probably spent legitimately $30,000 to $40,000 extra just because he wanted that one little feature that if he had opened his mind, he could have gotten for, like you said, $30 and just dumped it into one of a used car, right? So it's amazing that, yeah, people, unfortunately, they just get taken in by the bells and whistles and they really can't see the options that are there. And that's pretty frustrating. I'm just kind of going through my notes here, and just a couple other items I wanted to talk about is how Laura mentioned that we are not ruled by FI. And I think this is a really important one because I think a lot of people in our community are those ultra maximizers and they are obsessive personalities. And I mean, you would count yourself in that, obviously. So this is not like talking down about a certain segment of our audience. It's just that's what people do. I think it can be slightly dangerous when you just obsess constantly about every penny or every dollar and every decision and how is that going to impact. It's going to take me 27 more hours to reach FI someday and 20 years from now. That to me is not enjoying the journey. And I think enjoying the journey is a crucial aspect of FI. To us, living this life is like a fun game. It's like winning at life, right? So we're just doing these couple little things differently and we are quote unquote winning, right? In any way that society would term it. And certainly as opposed to the normal people living the 9 to 5 life. And again, we're not doing anything crazy. It's just these couple things. But then when you start taking that to the maximum and you start being that miser that I had talked about in the episode, right? Where like, oh, I'm going to a wedding. I can't give an expensive wedding present or even an average wedding present, right? Or, oh, we can't sign our kids up for that $80 art class or soccer or whatever it may be. I don't know. To me, it's just, that's where you get into it just being an obsession. And I want to live this wonderful, happy, abundant life. And I think when you focus on every little thing, it can deviate from that and stray from that. And I just want everyone to be aware. At the end of the day, if you decide, hey, I want to maximize every penny, then wonderful. I'm so glad you're making that decision with your eyes wide open and with intentionality. That is what I constantly talk about here, right? Is as long as you're making the decision and you're really thinking it through, then you certainly are never going to get any pushback from me. Like, all I care about is that you make this decision with intentionality. So it is important for me to stress that I need you to think about it. And I think that's important. So Jonathan, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Well, I mean, as you kind of mentioned, when you talk about something, a personality being all consumed by something, that would be me, right? That's the description of me. And so there was a funny story that was included in there in that particular episode that kind of threw me under the bus with ways that I've gotten too intense. And I'm okay with that to a degree. I would say that if you want the pursuit of financial independence to be a blessing to yourself and to your family, it's important to remember the why behind what you're doing it. So if the why is I want to spend my time with people that I value and that I care about, but in reality, all your time is spent checking your future value calculations on Excel and, just staring at the numbers endlessly, or I don't know, getting caught up in whatever obsession you have, but you're basically ignoring those people in the context of, well, I want to pursue FI more aggressively. You may have missed the target. Now, that's kind of one of those things that I have to direct at myself. My wife mentioned that idea of couch time, not an original phrase to us, but it's something that we've co-opted. And it's this idea of, can we have some dedicated a time where there's no technology? And I think that's a weak point for many of us, is that anytime we have downtime, we just kind of drift off into the next day, essentially. And the phone is perpetually in front of us, and we just don't want to think, because thinking is hard. Engaging with people in conversation is hard. You've had a long day. You've had a lot of stress. There's been all these other factors in your life. You don't want to continue the conversation. But what I find is that if I'm willing to give my wife even a little bit of myself in the context of what we just described, the support in my life is so much easier. I mean, everything else is better. My marriage is better. What I do with both my ChooseFI related time and my free time is better. It's when they feel like they are competing for your attention with your FI obsession that it can be a problem. And so, as with anything in life, balance is required.
Yeah, I totally agree. And one other thing that stuck out to me that both Danny and Laura mentioned were ways that they save money. So like Danny loves these buy nothing groups. And I was just so impressed with the rationale behind it, and where she was saying like she wants to eventually be able to provide for others and help them benefit from all of the ways that you guys are blessed and fortunate. She also said kids remember experiences. And I thought that was a neat, really, really neat quote. So, just obviously randomly going down my list of notes here, but those are two important things that stuck out to me. And with Laura, I'm not sure we did the greatest job fully explaining like how good of a shopper she is and how she's able to save money by buying things on sale and buying things for future dates. I think the latter comment is the much more important part. Like plenty of people think they're saving money by buying on sale, right? And Jonathan, you and I know that's usually a sucker's bet. But Laura is really, really good at this. She understands that because we do have financial resources, we can buy for the future, right? So we're not constrained by cash flow, which I think is how so many Americans live their lives. If you see a great deal, you can't necessarily buy it because you don't have the cash to cover it that month. But obviously that is not something that's a concern for us. So she's able to look down the road. And I think she gave some random example of buy one, get one half off. And that seems like a fairly pedestrian thing. But what I've seen her do is at the end of seasons, she'll find pants for our kids that are like $2. So instead of being like 20, they're $2. And she'll buy a couple pairs of these things for each kid in different styles, et cetera. And that's for next year. She'll buy for the next size. And then they'll have a wardrobe ready for just dollars, right? It's amazing. And it's that long-term thinking. It's the FI story. It's think down the road, think smarter, and just look for ways that you can win at life. So I think that's important. Another she does with birthday presents. If she sees some crazy super special at Target or Walmart, wow, that's a game that we love that's normally $20 and it's on sale for $6, she'll buy a handful of them, just knowing that the kids invariably are going to get invited to birthdays. And this is a quote unquote $20 present, right? But if she got it for $6 and she could buy some fantastic game that provides fun family time and educational value to another family, that is a win-win-win all around. It's amazing. And she doesn't have to scramble when Molly gets invited to a birthday party for 2 weeks in advance, and then she has to go out and buy a present, right? Like that would be the normal life, is she has to take 45 minutes out of her life to go to the store and buy something, or even just go to Amazon and search through. Well, no, she has these presents in the house. So it's saving that time. And I think that's an important thing. And we talked about that at the end, is your time has significant value. A lot of us in our pursuit of maximizing FI are just looking at the nuts and bolts of, will this save me money? Just yes or no, binary 0 or 1, as opposed to looking at, well, is there some time component here? And what is my time worth? I hear people all the time, oh, I'm going to go try to save money on gas at this station that's a couple miles down the road and it's 5 cents a gallon. It's like, for 45 cent savings, I'm not driving 15 minutes down the road. There's a 0% chance I would ever do that. That's insane in my opinion, because my time is certainly worth more than $2 an hour, right? So it's just these little things, like you need to consider that your time has value.
And Brad, I'm increasingly obsessed with this, and it's because I have the bandwidth now to focus on different skill sets that I want to grow and develop. And I've also reclaimed a fairly significant amount of time. And you got to wonder, where is that going? You know, I think there's an activity that's used by a lot of incredibly highly productive people and honestly very rich people like Bill Gates and Elon Musk, called time blocking. It's this idea of kind of segmenting your time out, segmenting your day out and what you want to accomplish, and then batch processing all of these tasks in these different blocks. And it's something that I'm looking at because, frankly, if I don't set a plan for my day and I can't think of what the next thing I'm supposed to be working on is, I devolve to Facebook. I devolve to checking my email or something random like that. And I check my email maybe 5 to 20 times a day instead of maybe checking it once or twice a day. In two certain areas, they spill over. You've been someone that's coached me on this idea of batch processing, putting these items together. And that is something that is massively huge. It's okay to just have downtime and to be quiet with yourself, be quiet with your thoughts, use it to meditate, use it to read a book, use it to talk, have a conversation with your spouse or friends. That's fine. But I think what many of us do is we actually are able to be more efficient in one aspect of our life, reclaim a fairly significant amount of time. And then because we don't want to take that extra step, we just give it back to Netflix or to our cell phone. That's a problem. That is a problem. That's not going to move you forward. You're not going to look back and say, this was a good choice. I'm so glad I spent 10 hours staring at my phone today. Wow, how productive. That will never happen. But if even for a short term, you can challenge and push yourself to allocate that new free time into your fitness, your health, your relationships, or maybe your talent stack, building or developing a skill, and you aggregate a few of these wins on top of each other, it propels you forward. We never want to be the group of people that's reclaimed all of our free time and then has put all of it back into catching up on Netflix or our cell phone. I mean, you just will not be happy with that.
No, you won't. There's no question about it. So yeah, great advice, Jonathan. And yeah, we got some nice feedback on this episode. Ying on YouTube said, love it. Laura and Danny are so level-headed, realistic, and resourceful. And Thelma said, great episode. You guys talk about a lot of good topics. Thanks for sharing.
And we got one message from Deanna, who writes over at missphiology.com. And she said, great episode. I love listening to you two power couples share your stories. I think I can best sum up the highlights by quoting you back. Brad, when referring to Laura valuing their time, you said your time has value. Don't waste it. Priceless, which I think is what you were just talking about there a second ago. Laura said, FI does not rule our life. We kind of buy what we need and what we value, and we buy it when we need it. Not spending money on the big stuff, which you don't really value, gives you this freedom. To me, that's what the independence and financial independence is all about. When Jonathan was talking about him being an all-in type of person, and she says, I'm right there with you. He said, it's getting more than having that dopamine hit that you get from the actual purchasing of the product. You know, it's for me, and this is what I was saying, I love pressing the checkout button on Amazon. I love that click. I get it. And then I love the unboxing, right? I love that process of having the new item and whatever, setting it up for the first time. But then a month later, am I still using it, right? Or am I just looking for the next thing? She says this should go on an anti-marketing billboard. And lastly, but certainly not least, when Danny was sharing how she came to the realization to encourage her husband to pursue his passion, she said, why were we doing this? Why were we trying to balance both when it was clear he was passionate about this one side, this podcast? And yeah, you need to make choices based on value. And sometimes those are small choices, and sometimes they have life-altering implications. And this episode kind of summed up for us the last several years.
Yeah, Deanna, thank you for taking the time to leave that amazing comment on Facebook. That was really, really helpful. Yeah, we talked a couple weeks ago about how we want to really highlight a lot more of these Facebook posts that are really up there on a daily basis in our Facebook group. People are talking about their wins and what's going well, and we really want to highlight these. And one that jumped out to me was from Jimmy, and he said, Brad and Jonathan, about a month ago, my friend and coworker called me to tell me he read this awesome book about minimalism on his flight to Vancouver for a backpacking trip and was pretty excited. After about an hour-long conversation about life and money, I told him to check out the ChooseFI podcast. He binged them and called me after almost every episode to discuss. In 1 month, he sold everything he doesn't value and got his entire monthly expenses down to under $2,000 a month. He's changed his 457 to max it out and has a plan laid out to reach FIRE in the next 5 to 7 years. He doesn't have Facebook, so I just wanted to send out a thank you for him because you guys have definitely changed his life. And wow, Jimmy, that is amazing. And a huge congrats to your friend. Hopefully he's listening to this, and that's remarkable. I mean, to have not known anything about this. He just happened to be reading a book about minimalism, then had a conversation with his buddy Jimmy, and now he has a plan to reach FI in the next 5 to 7 years. I mean, that is taking action truly. So a huge congratulations to your friend, and a big thank you to you for just talking about this message and living this life. So yeah, it's fantastic.
And Brad, it blows my mind how many people can turn this thing around on a dime. How many people think they have to work that 40-year career in a job they barely tolerate? And I say this recognizing that not everybody feels that way. Many people love their jobs. And I'm one of those people now, but I'm also envious for the longest part of my life of people that just literally tap dance their way to work every single morning. If you're in that role, I realize that this concept may not resonate as much with you, but you have it made, and you're very, very fortunate. How many of us feel trapped for this 40-year cycle and we can't visualize another way? And then the concept of FI is presented to you and you're on a 5-year path to financial independence almost overnight by focusing on value and intentional living. And to me, what I've always appreciated about both the pillars of FI and frankly, what comes down to the mindset of FI is that it's always solve the problem. There is a strategy for every single person and every single situation. And while in this particular moment, I may not be able to give you that exact answer that you need without knowing all of your background and what your skill sets are and everything else, there are other people that have preceded you, that have gone down this path, made this slightly different choice, and succeeded with obstacles that are harder than the ones that you are currently facing. That should be very encouraging, especially when you realize that when you're crowdsourcing information, they're not hoarding this information to themselves, but they're willing to give it back and help someone else that's following in their footsteps. That's incredible. So if we're talking about an individual that is an entrepreneur but just can't figure out the tax strategies for an entrepreneur, there is a strategy in place for this. If this is a situation where you're just not making enough money, There are plenty of other people that have not made enough money and now are making plenty of money. And there are strategies in place for that. Sometimes this is a frugality problem where, frankly, you are just spending twice as much as you're earning, and you're doing it without looking at the realities in which you find yourself. And if you just dial it in, you can get yourself back onto a strong financial footing. When you look at your life as it is now, the place you find yourself is not where you're always going to be. This is a snapshot in time. What can you do to position yourself for a better future? And what are your options? I think that's a very encouraging message. And there's just so many other places to go with this. But the idea is to collect as much information as possible and then implement it into a game plan to gamify this life out and make it fun. So you're actually excited about what's the next piece of this puzzle that I can put in, and constantly reclaiming that bandwidth and putting it to a brighter future. And talking about brighter future, Jeff left this post in the Facebook group. He says, late 2016, I sold my car, and then my wife and I started on the journey to FI. But before we could really get going, we needed to get rid of our student loans. Well, 19 months in and $105,000 later, I am happy to say that they are gone. Student loans paid off. Brad, I'll be honest with you. I did a student loan burning party. I never mentioned this, but when I completely paid off my student loans, I held a small lighter wick torch. You know, if I had had one of those butane torches, it would have been a lot cooler, but I'm afraid it was just a little lighter, and I burned my student loan paperwork. So it's a really, really good feeling.
That's really, really cool. And yeah, just a huge congrats to Jeff and his wife. And yeah, if I'm looking at his picture here, which I'm assuming is real, it looks like one of them is a pharmacist, actually. So near and dear to your heart. And yeah, it's neat to see them pay off $105,000 in 19 months. It's beyond words incredible. So a big congrats. And Jonathan, we're always looking to highlight what our ChooseFI local groups are doing. I know you and I are trying to make our own local group experience better by frankly getting out of the way. I mean, you and I have kind of not done a great job as admins. And what we've done is bring in a team of, I think, about 5 people who are looking to just make the group better and make it just much more of a community. And one group that we look to for inspiration is the San Diego group. The ChooseFI San Diego group is just remarkable. And Jennifer posted on the Facebook page saying that ChooseFI San Diego had a real estate investment meeting in late June, and local members shared their experience, ideas, pros and cons, etc. The discussion covered hands-on investment management in San Diego, out of state, hands-off investment/management, hands-on local Airbnb and owning and running Airbnb. It was amazing. So it even led to a buy versus rent discussion, which will be covered more extensively at a future event. And yeah, it's really cool. She has a picture here. It looks like a nice group of probably about 30 people, which is remarkable. They have an amazing group out there in San Diego. And as always, if you want to join the local ChooseFI group in your area, just head to choosefi.com/local.
And I want to stress that these local groups are going to be as good as you want them to be, like you personally. If we were all 100% committed to crowdsourcing information for our local geographic region, these groups they would transform the landscape of your area. It would be incredible. Imagine having a pathway, having one place that you could go to for the best recommendations in terms of exploring stuff with your family, frugal activities, finding recommended service providers. And on top of that, you could form mastermind groups in your local area. And on top of that, you can get very focused meetings where you can learn about a new skill set, and you would have access to individuals that have actually gone 3 or 4 steps ahead of you. This would likely provide opportunities for mentors in your local area, people that were looking to give back to other people that they knew were very focused on this concept. And you're operating from the same worldview. These groups, when we originally had the idea to try and focus on them, we thought it was a cool idea, but it wasn't until we saw mass adoption by thousands of people that we realized that this was so much more than we ever had planned. And I promise you, if you get involved in this now, 5 years from now, you'll look back and you say, wow, being a part of that group radically transformed my experience in my own city in the best possible way. We're so excited about this, and this is still the early days. So one, if you're in a local group, then thank you for being a part of it and be engaged. And two, if you're thinking, wow, I love this idea, but I don't have one in my local area, we would love to help you set one up. And just send us an email to feedback@choosefi.com, letting us know, where you are and where you'd like to see one happen. So we can definitely help with that. All right, Brad. Well, let's take a few minutes and crowdsource the remainder of this show. I thought that we could go ahead and start by playing a voicemail that we got from Ryan, basically wanting to get our input on robo-advisors.
Hey guys, my name's Ryan. I'm from Costa Mesa, California, and I wanted to first start out and say thank you so much for all you guys do. I really appreciate it, and I'm loving your podcast. A friend of mine turned me on to your podcast maybe 3 weeks ago, and since I've been just devouring content, both on the podcast, from your blog, and from those that you interview and mention. It's been awesome. So thank you for that. My question is in regards to, I'm new to the FI community, but I've always been a saver. And so I have a 401k, I have my Scottrade brokerage account, and then I have a Roth IRA. And I'm wondering, I've heard a lot of things about, in the community and otherwise, about robo-advisors. And so I wanted to ask you specifically in regards to somebody who's new kind of to this community and getting going, what are your thoughts on getting started in your taxable accounts? Would you consider either having a robo-advisor in combination with doing, like say, going directly to a Vanguard.com or a Fidelity, or would you just say go straight to Vanguard or Fidelity, or which one would you pick of those even? So folks like Mr. Money Mustache and Mad Fientist have mentioned Betterment and Wealthfront, for example, for the robo-advisors is what I'm kind of curious about. I'm kind of open to using those as well as the traditional brokerage account or one or the other. So I want to get you guys' thoughts. So thank you again and hope to hear from you soon.
I actually have some significant opinions, which I will put out there for public consumption. But before I do that, Brad, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's a really good question by Ryan. And first, I wanted to welcome Ryan to the FI community, and thanks for listening and leaving the voicemail. It's a great question. So I think what we've hit on here is that fees matter, and we try to avoid advisory and mutual fund fees as much as we possibly can. So my natural bias is to just invest with either Vanguard, Schwab, or Fidelity directly. You can find index funds and EFTs for 3 to 5 basis points, so 0.03 to 0.05% expense ratios. And that is just a minuscule amount. And I think over decades, that's going to be your best option. But that said, if there's something that you're uncertain about, if there are people that you want to talk to, if you want to get advice, like there are definitely ways to do it. I think there are fee-only financial planners, and that's an option. I know we had Chris Hutchins from Grove on here. I think they charge well under $1,000. I don't know precisely what the amount is at publication of this, but that might be an option if you just need to talk to somebody. I'm not sure why you would pay an advisor unless you had a need. So whether it's a robo-advisor or a traditional advisor, if you want a plan, well, maybe pay for the plan in and of itself, right? So to me, there's value there. That said, there are some benefits, certainly, of these robo-advisors. And you hear they do things in an automated fashion that your brain probably would not be able to do, right? Or would not be able to do without a significant amount of work. So capital loss harvesting is one of those things that I've heard is a benefit of Betterment in particular. And you could do it yourself, certainly, but that service does it automatically. So maybe if you judge that that's worth paying I'm not sure what the exact fee is, 20 or 30 basis points probably, then maybe it might be worth it. I know Vanguard actually has a low-cost advisory service that they charge 0.3% for. I don't know much about it, frankly, but I think it's their response to these robo-advisors. So that might be something worth looking into. I think, though, I would take a step back and say, what is the fundamental idea behind why I'm going for an advisor, whether it be a live person or a robo-advisor? And if you judge that it makes sense to pay that fee, then go for it. That makes sense. But don't just do it because you read an article or it seems to be a beneficial or whatever it may be. Like, you can obviously educate yourself, and we believe that low-cost index funds just in general are going to be the best bet over decades. So to me, again, my bias is towards that.
And, I would say the one thing that Brad didn't mention is this idea of resistance. I truly believe that investing can and should be simple. And I think that the complexity is added for reasons that aren't always in the investor's best interest. And so while I think that you absolutely can and should do this to yourself, the reason that Betterment and Wealthfront have kind of done really well is that they offer an incredibly intuitive interface. They're just fun and clean and easy to use. They have a very similar interface to maybe what you would see if you were looking at like a Mint or a Personal Capital. No one looks at the Vanguard interface and says, man, this just makes me feel warm and fuzzy. It just, it's just like with all of these kind of corporate type entities, it feels a little bit clunky. I will say that there's one that's popped up on my radar over the last year called M1, also a robo-advisor, but it gives you a lot of the benefits that you hear about with like a Wealthfront or a Betterment. And it has a wonderful interface that's very, very simple to use, but they don't charge any commissions, which is just really, really incredible. And we had a review that we did on this. I'm planning on talking about it more in another episode, but I'm really excited about it. And so I think with a lot of my taxable investments, I'm actually looking at this platform. One of the reasons that it's so exciting to me is that they allow you to do fractional shares of ETFs. And so you basically decide how much you want. Now, in my case, it's pretty simple because I'm basically all in on total stock market index. But for the individual that maybe has a slightly more complex portfolio, you can develop what they call a pie. So I want 20% of this, 17% of that, whatever. You could divide this pie any way you want. And then you just say how much you want to invest, and it will purchase those ETFs for you in those fractional amounts, which is just absolutely incredible. It reduces that resistance down to a minimum. And we are going to have additional content on this as well. But I just think that one of the major benefits of these robo-advisors, strip that name away, but this next generation of investing is that they just make things look easy and fun to use. And that resistance is a big deal. If you lose the decade of your 20s because it was too much work to set up an account, and then when you got in there, you couldn't figure out how to make a buy order, you couldn't figure out how to link it to different accounts, and you lose that decade, which I know that sounds crazy, but I promise you there are many, many tens of thousands of people that got started but walked away because it was too complicated. Then it is a difference of hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars at the end of your investing lifetime. And I know we mentioned a bunch of different platforms. We'll put a link to all of those different platforms in the show notes for today's episode if you're interested in getting more information on any one of those. And we got another voicemail that I want to play for you. This is from Bonnie, and she just wants to share a resource that might be available in your area that you hadn't heard of.
Hey guys, my name is Bonnie Redfield, and last night my husband and I listened to your episode about the side hustle, and I wanted to tell you about something I'm doing as a stay-at-home mom and wife while my husband is our sole provider. There is a website called Garage Sale with a V, like a virtual garage sale. So it's garagesale.com, and it's available all across the country, and it's only for women, which is really kind of neat. And what it is it's an online community to be able to sell and buy items, and you can literally sell anything that you want. I have gone through our closets, our attic, all kinds of places in our home, and found things that we weren't using, and I have put them on there thinking nobody's going to want this, but I actually sell them. And what I've really gotten into recently is we live in a suburb of Nashville, Tennessee, and we have a lot of good Goodwills around us with lots of good items. And being a stay-at-home mom, I'm able to go to those Goodwills several times a week, and I look for things that I know are either high-end clothing items that I can, clean up or wash or whatever, iron them, make them look nice, put them on garage sale, and get a lot of money off of that sale. But recently, I've been getting into furniture. And so, for example, I got a dresser at Goodwill last week for $10, and I'm probably going to be able to flip it once it's all painted and cleaned up for around $250. I also go to garage sales quite a bit, and just yesterday through the garage sale website, I flipped an antique vanity that I got at a garage sale. It was the end of the day, the people were ready to get rid of their furniture, and I got an antique vanity for $20, and yesterday I sold it for cash for $200. Everything through the website has to be cash purchases. And also, you can only meet with other women. So you have to meet in a mutual place, but if it's a larger item, you can go to that person's home to pick it up. So you might meet in the Target parking lot and you tell them what you're driving and you meet up with the other person and you do the exchange, you get your cash and you go on your way. I would say since I started doing garage sale around, I guess, 2 or 3 years ago, I have easily made a profit well over $1,000 or more. It's just something I have on the sides. I may go a couple weeks without selling anything, or I may have a weekend where like this week, I'm set to bring in around $300. So I wanted to share that for women out there, especially women who are stay-at-home moms, maybe. It's a great resource to have as a side hustle. Thanks for all you guys do.
Wow, that's an incredible idea. And what a great way to go ahead and bring in some extra income.
Yeah, I like this by Bonnie. Thanks for leaving the voicemail. I really appreciate it. I think for people who are smart consumers and get some fun and joy out of these kind of shopping at garage sales and looking to flip these items, I think it can be a fairly lucrative business. And it actually reminds me, we had the admins of our ChooseFI Long Island group. They just came through Richmond on a big trip that they were doing. And I wound up meeting with Rich and Jill, and she was describing how she does something similar to this. And I think she makes some pretty significant income, and it's really impressive. And it just sounds like it's a lot of fun. So yeah, Bonnie, very cool. I'd never heard of garagesale.com before, but definitely will see if Laura wants to check it out. It sounds like it's for women only. So that's really neat.
Well, Ruth actually left a post in our Facebook group relatively recently. She was reporting on an article that was actually in the Wall Street Journal. And in that article, they stated that Americans are spending $1.2 trillion annually on goods or services they don't actually need. And according to the Orlando Sentinel, nearly 1 out of 10 American households rents a storage facility, which costs anywhere from $125 a month to $165 a month. Of those who rent, 65% have a garage, 47% have an attic, and 33% have a basement. Clearly, we have too much stuff. And I think what you find as you're looking at this from the outside and you're looking for opportunities is that, everybody enjoys the getting more than the having. They just want to purchase stuff. They don't actually want to have it. And inevitably, that creates a massive secondhand kind of conduit. And if you're there as a smart purchaser, you can turn that inefficiency into income. I mean, that's what Viraj is doing. All right, Brad, this next voicemail that we're going to play is actually from Anthony. He had a question about capital gains harvesting.
Hi, Brad and Jonathan. I've been going over your capital gain harvesting podcast, and I think it's very interesting, but I am a bit confused about what it means to actually increase your basis. Particularly, I don't really know what a basis is. If you could go over that, that would be great.
All right, Anthony, this is a very good question. And yeah, we never want to bog people down with jargon at all. So thanks for asking for the clarification, certainly. So in the simplest terms, basis is just the original purchase price. So it's what you bought that stock for. Now, just doing some quick research, it is adjusted for stock splits and dividends and return of capital distributions is what I'm reading here. But in general terms, people consider basis is what you bought it for. So in a very simple example, so let's say you bought a stock for $100 and that is your basis, and you sell it for $150. Well, the way that you calculate the capital gain on the sale of that stock is not the $150 of the selling price. You have to reduce it by your basis. So the gain is only the amount that it went up. So in this case, it's 150 minus the basis of 100, and you have a $50 capital gain that would be taxed. Now, that would either be long-term or short-term, depending on whether you held that stock for under or over a year. That's the line of delineation for long-term capital gain is over 1 year. And there are preferential tax rates for long-term cap gains. So that's something to consider if you ever are at a point where you're selling stocks. That's just kind of like a general background in basis. But I guess with capital gains harvesting, which is kind of an unusual topic, really. But what we're doing here is we're taking advantage of basically a FI hack or the FI mindset of being in a position where you're paying 0% on capital gains because you're in such a low tax bracket otherwise. And now what this does is, and why it increases your basis, is you sell those older stocks, those stocks that you've held for years, or mutual funds in this case, right? And you sell them at what in essence is a lower basis. Because let's say you bought it 10 years ago and you bought that share of the mutual fund for $80. Let's say, just for argument's sake, the total stock market index fund was $80 10 years ago, and now it's selling for $160 per share. Well, you have that built-in capital gain, long-term in this case, of $80, right? Just the difference between the two. But when you sell it, you're creating that capital gain, right? So you get the $160 in cash by selling it. And normally there would be a capital gain that's taxable of that difference, the $80 difference. But because your capital gains harvesting, again, in this kind of unusual scenario, you're paying $0 in tax. All right. So that's the beauty of this. But what you do is you would just rebuy that share of the total stock market index fund for $160. And now, voila, your tax basis is $160, right? So you've created this thing where now in the future, your capital gains are based off of $160 in basis for that fund. So it is this really, really brilliant thing. And again, you do not hear much about this in like the real world because most people don't have the ability to be in that low tax bracket to pay 0% in capital gains tax. So that's why this is a rather unique FI hack for sure. And Jonathan, did that explanation make sense? Do you have any follow-up questions or anything?
Not question. Yeah, I just wanted to slow down and highlight probably kind of that end point there. So what you were saying is you sell the stock that is now valued at $160. Normally, you would be taxed on that difference between what you initially bought it at and what it's valued at now, the $80. But in your case, because you're in a lower tax bracket, the government, based on the way the rules are now inside the United States, has basically made the statement that they are not going to tax you on that amount if it's a long-term capital gain. So you're like, hey, government, you can tax me. And they're like, no, you're good. You're okay. It's totally fine. And so you say, fine. And then now you just repurchase the stock at the higher basis. That for me, that's the language I use to remember this type of stuff.
Yeah, I like it.
This is why they don't invite me to accountant conferences or financial planning conferences.
No, but that's a good explanation. And yeah, you're basically artificially creating what would normally be known as a taxable event. You're selling a mutual fund in this case and creating that $80 of capital gains, which would normally be taxed. But because, again, you're at a point where it's a 0% tax, you're laughing all the way to the bank, as it may be, right? Like you're not paying anything in tax and you're getting to rebuy it with the money that you have now sitting in your bank account, that $160. So you've just raised your basis and taken away that potential tax that you thought you'd have to pay. So it's a beautiful, beautiful thing.
What's crazy about this is I feel like in the normal personal finance world, you hear a lot about tax loss harvesting. I mean, that's out there. I don't know if it's common speak and everybody's talking about it, but you certainly hear about it. I don't hear anybody talking about capital gains harvesting. I mean, you just don't hear it anywhere. And in the FI community, this is a major vehicle. And I think part of it is that you have individuals that on the spectrum, and I'm not saying this, this is probably an overgeneralization, but we are the stealth wealth community, right? We are accumulating massive amounts of wealth on somewhat modest incomes. I mean, this is the path that anybody can follow. And there's a huge spectrum there. I mean, we have people in our community that are making $12 an hour, people in the community that are making $760,000 a year. I mean, I get that there's a spectrum, but as a whole, as an overgeneralization, you have the middle class that is learning how the tax laws work and are using it for their benefit. And that is incredible. And I think that is why you hear us talking about capital gains harvesting, and you will never go to your traditional personal finance place and hear them talking about it. It's just they're oblivious to it.
Yeah, and it is, like I had said, it's pretty rare. And I'm reading an article right now just to give some clarification on how this applies. And this article says how the 0% rate works. The 0% tax rate on capital gains applies to people in the 15% marginal tax rate or below. In 2018, that applies to married tax filers with taxable income up to $77,400 and single tax filers with taxable income up to $38,700. So if you're below that, you have this space for this 0% capital gains tax. And that's the real trick here. So yeah, people just don't talk about this. I don't know why, Jonathan. I mean, maybe they're catering to audiences that have taxable incomes over that amount. I genuinely don't know. But what we want to do is we want to arm our audience and our community with this information. And I think this is really useful.
So when you said bandwidth there, or when you said space there, so you gave the 2 limits for the married filing jointly. But what that would practically mean is if you had a single individual, a person filing single tax form, then if they make less than $38,700, so maybe they make $25,000, they have about a $13,000 space that they can harvest capital gains if they're able to, increase their taxable accounts to the point where that's a viable option. And then for the married filing jointly, and their limit, did you say it was $77,000?
Yep, $77,400.
So if between the two, they are making, $50,000 to $60,000, somewhere in that range. They now have almost a $17,000 window that they can use to harvest capital gains if they were to have enough, again, in their taxable investment accounts that could justify that. So it's just an additional lever that you have available. And, as you get farther down this path and your investments are snowballing, right? They're compounding over time. This becomes more and more of a viable option. And to our audience that's listening to this, we actually did a case study talking about capital gains harvesting. It was episode 18 was where we introduced it. And then episode 18R, the Friday roundup that week, we just went all in on doing a case study. And the only thing I will say on that is it was based on 2017 tax numbers, and the numbers have changed a little bit with obviously this major tax overhaul that we had inside the United States. So you do have to take that into account, but the principles are all laid out there. And I think that would be a valuable use of your time just to look at it. To our audience, I hope you got value from kind of a review on that topic and that you're thinking about it. You have all of these levers available to you. What are you going to pull? All right, now, unfortunately, that is going to bring this episode to a close. Now, as you know, we like to finish every episode by doing a drawing for a copy of a book that we have found useful. And there's 3 books that we offer. It's J.L. Collins' book, The Simple Path to Wealth, Dominic Cortuccio's book, Design Your Future, and Vincent Puglisi's book, Freelance to Freedom. If you want to enter the drawing, all you have to do, just go to ChooseFI.com/iTunes, follow the instructions there and leave us a short written review, and then send us an email to feedback@ChooseFI.com, letting us know that you left a review and what screen name you left it under. And we will give away 1 book for every 5 written reviews that we get, and we announce the winner on the Friday roundup. And Brad, how many winners do we have today?
All right, Jonathan, we have 1 winner today, and the winner is Mabel.
And Mabel says, FI for all. Admittedly, this is a long overdue review. I've been following ChooseFI since near its inception, and they continue to amaze me with the content they put out and the even more amazing community they have helped build through their Facebook groups. Whenever I meet others who are interested in the idea of FI, ChooseFI is the #1 site podcast resource I refer them to amongst others. Their earlier episodes are more of a how to achieve FI, but as the episodes continue, they start branching out and they interview others who have achieved financial independence through different means. I really appreciate how non-dogmatic they are about the approach or even the definition of FI. They want all voices and opinions available for their audience so we can decide for ourselves what is the best path for us. It's like a gigantic space for crowdsourcing, and I love that. I look forward to Mondays when new content is put out, but I'm actually more eager for Fridays when they do their roundups, which are essentially a review of the previous Monday episode, plus call-ins and other random FI-related stuff. It kind of feels like you have a friend to engage with and rehash over a good podcast you just heard. Of course, this is somewhat imaginary, but like I previously mentioned, there is a real community of people you can join who likes talking openly about money, investment strategies, life hacks, life optimization, and they are wicked smart, generous, and wanting to help others. Please check out this podcast now. Wow, Brad, that was an amazing review. Mabel, thank you so much.
Yeah, that might be one of the best reviews of all time. So yeah, Mabel, thank you very much for the review. And to everyone out there who've left the reviews, we really appreciate it. We read every single one of them. And a huge heartfelt thank you from Jonathan and I.
If you got value from today's episode, if you've been getting value from the episodes up to this point, just take 1 second and press the subscribe button on the platform you're listening to this on. It just lets the providers know you're getting value from the show and you want to be here when we produce additional content. All right, my friends, the fire is spreading. We'll see you next time as we continue to go down the road less traveled.
You've been listening to ChooseFI Radio Podcast, where we help middle-class America build wealth, one life hack at a time.